Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for May 22nd, 2018. On today's episode, we'll discuss the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast are Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall, Senior Writer Ben Pearson, and Writer Hoai-Tran Bui. We have a packed show today because we did the water cooler Monday. We have a lot of news, and I'm actually excited to have Jacob on talking about a lot of stories that he actually wrote. Usually Jacob is kind of, the puppet master behind the scenes on Slash Film. He used to write a lot, but we actually got him today talking about stuff he cares about, which is interesting. Yeah. Yes. Let's start out with HT, though. Let's talk about news that broke yesterday, and that is that Marvel and Sony's Spider-Man sequel has cast Jake Gyllenhaal in the role of Mysterio. And Michael Keaton's also coming back, too. HT, what do we know? Yeah. It's interesting that they're bringing Mysterio into here because, we have been told that the Spider-Man series, each one will have, Peter Parker kind of bringing in someone from the MCU into his story. The first film brought in Tony Stark. I'm going to propose the idea that the sequel could maybe bring in Doctor Strange to help Peter Parker deal with this guy that he thinks has real magic, but is just using practical effects. Jacob, is that insane? And we also have word that Michael Keaton's coming back to reprise his role as Vulture. Ben, are you excited to see Michael Keaton return? Yes. That would be so funny. I almost wonder if there's a way of making the Vulture kind of a confidant to Peter Parker, like to have him like have to go to him in some way to for help. I guess he already has Tony Stark kind of filling that kind of brotherly, fatherly role. Yeah. Well, we will keep our eyes on this as we learn more. Let's move on to Star Wars because we've got to move on to Star Wars. And there is a new article, basically explaining the behind the scenes clashes on Solo's Star Wars story. Ben, you wrote this up for the site. What did we learn? But it makes sense if you listen to Ryan Johnson or J.J. Abrams talk about Star Wars, like each of them came in and were able to do whatever they wanted to do on those films, and they weren't really given any mandates of any kind by. And it should be said that you have not seen the film yet. Yeah. I mean, I do agree with you. This movie is safe, I guess. Like, it's not like anything like super duper surprising about it, in terms of like how it is, the tone or the execution of it. But I don't know, like, we know that 70% of this movie theoretically is Ron Howard's movie. So that means 30% of this movie was shot under Lord Miller, right? Like, I don't feel any part of this movie is kind of like surprising and whatever, you just said that they were going for. And theoretically that would be in there somewhere, right? Like some of it somewhere. I don't know. Well, I mean, we published a video from, I think, Entertainment Tonight where Harrison Ford showed up at the junket to surprise Alden, which I know was something set up, obviously, but I don't think someone like Harrison Ford would show up, would take the time off, head to Pasadena, which is probably nowhere near where he lives, to, show up at a junket and do that appearance, if he didn't want to. Like, there's no contractual, thing with him. Like, that must have been, he actually likes the movie. But, yeah. Let's move on to Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, which had a premiere in Spain last night. Jacob, you were around and were able to round up the first tweets that came in Spanish. We have translated them poorly. And what did people think of the Jurassic World sequel? I, it's interesting because one person said it was the best of the saga. Is he talking about the Jurassic World saga or the Jurassic Park franchise as a whole? Because that would be some strong words. Because that first Jurassic Park film is, one of the best movies of all time in my mind. Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, I do think Jurassic World was the best Jurassic Park movie since Jurassic Park. If if this can beat out Jurassic World for that title, I think that's, I'm happy with that. I think what excites me about this is, these people saying it's so different than the last one and where they're going with this franchise. And I really don't know where they're headed. That's kind of exciting. But let's move on to, some TV news. We've been talking about Apple's, they're doing amazing stories. They've just hired, new showrunners, the Once Upon a Time guys that, also did Tron Legacy. HT, you're a huge fan of, or a big fan of the first season of Once Upon a Time. Tell us about this news. Because he leaves all the projects he's on. Yeah. Yeah, and that first season was great. Like they did a great job of reinventing the these fairy tales rather, and connecting them in a way. And it was almost done in an like anthology type way, but there was, obviously an overarching arc, connecting them. These guys, with Once Upon a Time, it seems like in the subsequent seasons didn't have a plan, it seems to me. And, they're also from Lost, which I think people often give that show crap for not having a plan. I don't know. I think this is a good place for them to be because, having a new story every week, every episode to tell, maybe is a good thing for them because they are good storytellers. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the Fast and Furious franchise. There's new news that Hobbs and Shaw will be a more grounded movie because that's what people who like the Fast and the Furious movies want, right? Ben, what do we know? Yes. It's weird because I always felt like Vin Diesel was the only one involved in this franchise that thought it was about the characters and about, um, that attachment to this family. And I think most of the people, I don't know, I could be totally wrong, but at least, my friends who are excited about this franchise are all in it because of the ridiculous over the top action that is totally not grounded in any way. And I feel like once you take that out of it, then you get back to like, the original Fast and the Furious movie, which, I mean, it's okay, but it's, yeah. For sure. And, we've been talking a lot recently about Netflix. They've been acquiring everything. They've been, they're making so much original content. And, they've been seen for a long time now as kind of a place where, kind of auteur filmmakers and showrunners could go and make their art. I mean, sure, we've also gotten things like Bright. But now, Michael Bay is coming to town. And he's going to be making a movie for Netflix starring Ryan Reynolds. Jacob, what do we know? But by the way, I would, after making that lead in, I would actually argue that Michael Bay is an auteur. But anyways, yes. Yes. I love the idea that Netflix is going to become the place to actually be the place where filmmakers can go and create their original movies that, the big Hollywood studios are not allowing them to make in, franchise-topia. Hmm. I don't know. We'll have to see what it actually is. It's hard to read into, a small plot synopsis like that. I'm gonna give it, I don't know. Let's give it a chance, guys. Let's give it a chance. Let's move on to, we were talking about The Expanse, which is this, hit, or not, I guess it's not that much of a hit, but a sci-fi series that a lot of fans loved that got canceled, and it's based on a book series. Fans have rallied, creating petitions, trying to convince the studios and networks to pick it up, and we might have, a savior. HT, tell us about it. I kind of love that we live in the world that our Lex Luthor, our rich billionaire Lex Luthor, is, obviously he is trying probably to do evil and take over the world, but at the same time, he's saving his favorite TV shows as well. And I don't know, that kind of makes me happy. Um, let's move on to our last and final story, and this one's an interesting one. We've been talking about Damon Lindelof is doing an Watchmen HBO series, which excited nobody because I think most Watchmen fans didn't want to see a Watchmen HBO series. But now Lindelof has come out and written a extensive letter clarifying what he is actually making. Jacob, you wrote this up and have some opinions. What is going on? I it is. You know what? It does sound like the right approach, but it does also at the same time, he had to spend like one whole page of the letter explaining what it is and what it isn't. And as much as, The Leftovers isn't a show for everybody, you can, pitch The Leftovers in one sentence to someone. And I'm very concerned of how do you pitch this to people who haven't read the book, haven't seen the movie? It's very, this is, I think, the first time something like this has been done on this level. It's kind of confusing. HT, do you have any thoughts? Yeah, and I'd highly recommend anybody listening to this that has any interest in a Watchmen TV series or doesn't have an interest in it. Actually, everybody listening should go read Damon Lindelof's letter, which is like a really heartfelt letter. It's really long. We have it in text form on slashfilm.com. So if you don't want to read it in a bunch of Instagram, small images on your phone, you can find it on slashfilm.com. As you can find all the stories we talked about today and listed in the show notes. You can find this podcast, Slash Film Daily, published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to peter@slashfilm.com, and go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.